Good evening, Brendan.
Good evening, Father.
Good evening, Melbourne. Welcome back to another episode of Sunday Night Live here from Melbourne. Episode 16, Brendan.
Number 16. Well, 17.
17.
But we're going to call it 16.
I think we actually need to stop talking about the episode that broke the internet. So I think...
Yeah, it's not actually there. You can't find it.
It's not actually
Number
there.
16. We've been doing this for 16 weeks.
We have, and we're back in the same room today, which means that you obviously passed off your social isolation test.
I did.
After your COVID test last week.
Yeah, after shoving up the swab up my nose and down the back of my throat, they told me, we'll call you, or we'll text you if it's negative. And fortunately, I got the text.
You got the text message.
That's it. It was one of the best text messages I've gotten in my life.
Well, we're glad to be back together, and we're glad to be streaming live here on YouTube and Facebook this week, especially to those young Catholics who are here in Melbourne who are joining us live, or those of you who are catching up later in the week on the podcast. But it's great to be able to get together and chat because we're at the end of another week of lockdown. We went in, we went out, and now we're back in.
We're back in round 2.
So it's our second weekend for most people without masses, the inability to visit our family and friends, and to get out. How's it been for you the past week?
Well, the first part of it, well, I fully recovered from, I just had a cold, so that was nice to kind of fully recover from. Otherwise, I'm working from home at the moment, so it hasn't shifted too much. And lifestyle, I've just been at home, just with family as well. So, and we're all working from home, so it hasn't changed too much for me. I'm sure it would have felt like you went heading back into it.
Well, again, it's been another quiet week, and I think the noticeable thing, I went to the supermarket yesterday and noticed the amount of masks. And I wasn't wearing a mask because I thought, no, I'm in a position to socially distance from others. I wasn't going to, but I noticed that I was one of the few people who wasn't wearing a mask.
I haven't gone to a supermarket, so
but
is that what's happening?
Well, yeah, we've seen the announcement today from the Premier here in Victoria that as of Wednesday, if you are out of your home for one of those 4 reasons, you have to be wearing a mask. And I think it's pretty confronting. I don't know if you haven't been out, you might not have experienced yet, but I find it pretty strange to be walking around and not being able to see people's faces, being able to see people's gestures. I bumped into a lady at the deli.
I hope you didn't actually bump into her.
No, we kept our socially appropriate distance.
Wonderful, yeah.
But part of it was that I didn't actually recognise her because when you're actually, there goes my pen. When you're actually only looking at this much of a person. Not to mention that when you're having the conversation with them, it's really hard to get their expressions. So I just...
You have to learn to smile with our eyes, Father. Smile with the eyes, you know?
Smile with the eyes.
Give me a smiling eyes.
The eyes are the gateway to your heart. Isn't that the saying?
Is it working?
No, it's not working, not at all.
I don't own any masks.
Well, I got a box. I've got a box, so I'll lend you a couple.
It's like a tissue box,
yeah, exactly.
But for masks.
Because the disposable ones only last a little while. So hopefully someone can start
There's
sewing.
There's cool designs though.
There is. The Americans have been in masks for a little while.
I got to style up. Yeah. I've got to figure out what kind of mask I'm going to wear.
Dan Andrews today said that we're going to be in masks for a little while. So we maybe need to get rid of this. But I think it's part of this social isolation and this sort of breaking of communion that I think it's just another level. I'm really struggling to come around with the isolation that it causes between us and society. If you're watching live tonight and you want to add something to the com box about whether you've had an experience with people and masks or what you think of your feeling about this next level of restrictions. And obviously none of us are arguing that we shouldn't be doing it, but it's important that we chat about
whatever Dan says I'll do.
Well, yeah.
I'll put the mask on, but it is just acknowledging the fact that it's kind of strange to.
And it's quite well. I definitely found it confronting during the week. So it'll be really interesting to see in the next couple of days when everybody has a mask on.
It just feels like a sci-fi movie.
Well,
it feels like one of those. Movies.
I've got a couple of seminarians living here at the moment, and we sat down on Friday night and watched Contagion, which is have you seen it? Late 90s, early 2000s, I think.
I have.
Matt Damon, Gwyneth Paltrow, I think, a few others. It's a bit of a classic, but it's a little bit scary as to how close it is to our current experience. So we watched it on iTunes, but I think you can get it on a number of the different platforms. So if you don't watch it if you're feeling a little bit down on the world at the moment and how things are going.
That's it. Yeah.
I noticed the absence of the cello this evening, Brendan. It obviously didn't make its way into the studio with you.
It didn't make it in my car. No.
How is the cello going?
Well, after the embarrassment of last week, I got really showed up by you because I was singing. Well, was that last week when I was singing the praises of my habit tracking app?
Yes.
And
No,
then you
2
just
weeks
pointed
ago.
out, and I made the bold statement that if I put anything on there, I'd be able to learn it, like guaranteed. And then you asked me how the cello was going, and I fell apart. So, I suppose a little bit out of spite, I picked up the cello, I tuned that bad boy, and tightened up the string, and I've learned Ode to Joy.
There you go. In 1 week.
In one, yeah. Actually, no. To be fair, it took me 30 minutes. But I kind of decided.
Imagine what you'd done. Imagine what you would do if you spent the whole week.
I know. Well, what I've done is I've ditched learning music. I can't do the learning music thing. I'm not there yet. I need to enjoy playing the instrument first, and then I'll go back to learning the music. Ode to Joy and Tantum Ergo. I'm not saying that right.
Yeah, Tantum Ergo.
Ergo. So I played that for some friends. They can be a testament to my somewhat ability to playing that. Please put something in the comment box just to verify.
Brendan's crying out for some positive affirmation here.
But yeah, I'm getting. Wait, what are you learning? What? It's always getting thrown to me.
It's skipping.
Have you done the? You're doing the doubles.
And board games. So Ticket to Ride in the last week. Got a little bit. A couple of games of Ticket to Ride.
That's
so
good.
I'm
Did you win?
broadening my
Okay. You've won a Catan game though.
I have won a couple of Catan games,
Alright.
a Ticket to Ride,
good.
and my skipping. So I'm progressing on my skipping.
What's the skipping at?
Well, I can skip continuously
That's
for
good.
periods of time.
That's a
good
Can
stuff.
you do the double skip?
I had a perfect segue from your cello playing
did you?
to Saint Cecilia to the Dominican Sisters of Saint
flip
Cecilia,
back.
who are going to be joining us a little bit later in the program.
There's
But
two
so
Cecilias.
let's move
Let's
off.
talk about not skipping. Let's skip back to the cello.
Exactly. So it's a great segue there. So we are really looking forward to later in the podcast having the Dominican Sisters of St. Cecilia, not just the community here in Melbourne, but we're going to be joined by two groups of the sisters together. And we were having a bit of a chat with them before we went live, and it was about as successful as Family Mother's Day over Zoom was with sort of toddlers, if you know. And there was that much noise and chitter-chatter and laughter and everybody trying to speak at once. So we're not going to know where the second half of the podcast goes, but we're really looking forward to having a chat with the sisters. It's if nothing, it's going to be a lot of laughs. So we look forward to that. But before we do that, of course, Brendan, we have to go to everyone's favourite segment, which is Brendan's Top 5.
We still need a jingle. We need a graphic.
Well, I think it should be you on the cello playing Ode to Joy, sort of. How's Ode to Joy?
Brennan's Top 5.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, give us your top 5.
Top 5. Last week we did Uber Eats, and I kind of this food thing. I feel like I'm getting passionate about. Let's just take a sip because today's top 5 is brought to you by water. No, it's beverages. Top 5 beverages, Father.
Okay, starting at number 5.
Starting at number 5, and I'm going to address my notes, which is in this
I
nice
did have a
little
chat
book.
with Brendan that every now and then this segment goes a bit off the rails because he forgets his own top 5, and when it's entitled
Because
Brendan
I've put some categories on this one, because you can't just say top 5 beverages, because you know when you ask someone this question, and they're like, alcoholic or non-alcoholic, hot or cold? So we're going to, one for each.
Okay.
So let's just get alcohol out of the way. Top alcohol.
Yep.
You're not going to guess it. It's a Polish cherry vodka. Dark cherry, I think. I don't know. But it's really good. You haven't tried it yet.
So ladies and gentlemen, just remember, if we do go to stage 4, the bottle shops will be closing, so make sure you get out there to get your Polish cherry vodka before it sells off the...
Great little place near Caulfield that sells this particular cherry vodka because they import it. So anyway, that's the number one. Yeah, what are people thinking about this? Has anyone else had this cherry vodka? I don't know the actual name of it, so that's not very helpful. But that's my number one. What in the com box? Tell me your top one alcohol, your top alcoholic drink. But let's move on. Number 2, top hot drink.
Top hot drink, yeah.
I feel like you need to be doing this at the same time.
Okay,
as
top
me.
alcoholic drink.
I guess whiskey.
Well, it just depends where I am and what time of year it is.
If you're walking the Camino, it's that little shot thing that you...
Oh, yerbis. No,
Yeah,
no.
no.
This is going to sound really bad. I hope the sisters aren't listening too closely to us talking about the various drinks that we enjoyed in Spain. We did a lot of praying as well, sisters, if you are listening.
I didn't like the yerbis.
I think it would have to be middle of summer gin and tonic.
Oh, of course.
I think
true.
you just can't.
Oh,
you
that was
can't
so
go past
good.
it in the
Yeah,
middle
no,
of
it's
summer.
true.
Okay, so top. Okay,
With
top
which
hot
gin, very quickly.
Hendrix.
Yeah, nice. Very nice. Okay,
Cucumber.
that's top alcoholic. Let us know your favorite top alcoholic beverage.
Gin and tonic. Thanks,
There we
Jerry,
go.
very much on the same thing. James doesn't drink, but that's okay. We're going to get to non-alcoholic. Brendan.
Right next one is
Hot drink.
top hot drink, and it is it's a dark hot chocolate for me. I'm still a child. I actually know I am starting to like coffee.
Not the cola
but
cacao.
not. Ooh. Yeah, last year, that was 1 year ago. I was drinking so many cola cacaos. It's basically like hot chocolate in a little sachet.
Yeah,
Man, they were the bomb.
they were.
Take it
Okay,
back.
hot chocolate.
Hot chocolate, what's yours? Top hot drink?
I would have to. Well, it's my top drink of all time, so I think it would have to be coffee. Like
Oh,
you just
right,
can't.
sorry.
You can't
Yeah.
get past coffee. A really good
How do
coffee.
you have it? A latte?
Well, it just again, it depends on the time of the day. It depends on how many I plan to drink that day. I don't mind black coffee or with a dash of milk. I discovered the wonders of
Turkish, Lebanese.
oat milk.
Oh, ooh, yeah, no, I have
Much
tried
much
that.
smoother than almond milk.
Yeah, is it sweet? A little bit sweet as well?
Is it? I don't know. Someone told me that all those milk alternatives are full of sugar, but.
Okay, well.
So coffee is my number one hot drink. Brendan.
Very good. Let us know your top hot drink. The third one is top cold drink. And it's a McDonald's caramel frappe. Hands down. Top. It is so good. I don't know what Macca's is doing.
McDonald's caramel frappe.
Discontinued it. And it's completely unacceptable because it was so good. I have fond memories of back in year 11 or year 10, Mum and I would stop off and get that caramel frappe on the way home.
That's lovely.
A little bit too often, to be honest. All right, what's your top cold drink?
I was thinking about this before. I have to say mineral water. So one of the best investments I ever made was a soda stream. And just bubble. There you go. Have a sip.
It is in a
Tonight's
different
podcast
category.
brought to you by SodaStream.
Sponsor us.
Yeah, exactly. We're still looking for some sponsors if anyone knows anyone. We'll sell ourselves to the devil. Sort of. No.
Sorry, what?
Soda. Yeah. So just
We wouldn't
soda
do-
water or mineral water. I think a cold mineral water.
Well, that actually fits top. The next one's carbonated drink. So you've hit the 2 for 1 here.
Yeah.
You would say, no, I was tossing up. It was either mineral water because that really got me off soft drink, but there's something very close to my heart, and that's Coke Vanilla.
Coke vanilla.
Vanilla Coke.
You're a bit of a sweet tooth.
I'm
really
not.
Caramel frappe and vanilla Coke. Like, been to the dentist lately?
I'm not a sweet. I really wouldn't have called myself a sweet tooth, but this is seriously opening my eyes a little bit.
I think Coke no sugar is actually growing on me as the non-sugar alternative.
Do you know what they say?
Well, what do they say?
They say that people only enjoy it because it has the grey lid. They
Who-
just like
Who's they? Who's they say that?
They is everyone. But they did a thing. It's like, so Coke, when they first released it, because people kind of get the idea, they associate the fact that the grey lid is what makes it healthy. Because what they did for a little while, Coke went back to the red tops for the diet Coke, no sugar. Oh, actually, maybe it's the diet one. Anyway, same diff. And sales dropped drastically.
The one thing I don't like about it is the name.
No sugar.
Yeah, Coke no sugar. It just
It's got that little...
it sounds a bit silly.
It's got the
asking
other
for
thing.
it. That's all. There's a few people who have agreed with the mineral water in the
talk to me,
com box.
people. Yes.
Joseph Schaefer,
anyone
one of
has
our
a soda
seminarians, is a great friend of Coke Vanilla, and otherwise the caramel frappuccino is a favourite of Rebecca and Michael as well.
Yeah, see?
Okay, and your top.
Could start a petition.
So we've done. I've lost track. Cherry vodka.
Dark hot chocolate, caramel. I really
Caramel
am a sweet tooth.
frappe,
This is
yeah.
strange. And then Coke vanilla. I have it occasionally. That's
Vanilla
one.
Coke.
And then the next. Totally forgot. Number 1 nutritious drink. Nutritious, because look, drinks are versatile.
Maybe what does it say about me that I I now struggle to find a number one nutritious drink. What's a nutritious?
Wait, what?
I'm just.
Oh, like a healthy, like a fruity, like a Boost juice. That's not true. Boost juice are full of sugar. But there's a place in Melbourne.
Us, Will.
Actually, no, not Boost. We won't take Boost, but we will take Tropicana in Melbourne. Tropicana or Tropic something. They have oranges out the front of the place, but they make it all with like 100% fruit.
Right.
And it's really good.
Oh, is this the one on Elizabeth Street?
There's two of them, so maybe
near St. Francis Church?
I think there's one near there, and then there's one near St. Mary. No.
Okay.
No. That's
we digress. There. What's your top?
Up and go.
More than up and go.
Up and go. It's very very useful.
Breakfast in a carton.
And they say it's what, 2 Weet Bix and milk equivalent?
Exactly. I would never eat the Weet Bix and milk, but
I like Weet Bix and milk in the morning.
The up and go.
Yeah, up and go. Protein, the protein choc energized one.
So there we go. That's Brendan's top 5.
That's my top 5
for this week.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Oh, we've
done food, drinks, podcast, books. We just can't wait until next week. Please, if you've got a suggestion for Brendan's 5
breath mints. Eclipse is definitely number 1.
Oh yeah, okay. Yeah.
Off Fisherman's Friend, maybe? Yeah. Anyway, moving on.
So again, obviously it was a weekend without masses for most people.
Yes.
So a lot of people watching podcasts or liturgies online, and hopefully also spending some time with the readings. And we got in the Gospel today from St. Matthew, the parable of the wheat and the darnel. So if you didn't hear it already, we might just read it now just to sort of enter into that Gospel again, even if you have already heard it. So we're from the 13th chapter of Matthew's Gospel. Another parable he put before them, saying, "The kingdom of heaven may be compared to a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while men were sleeping, his enemy came and sowed weed among the wheat, and went away. So the plants came up and bore grain, and the weeds appeared also. And the servants of the household came and said to him, 'Sir, did you not sow good seed in your field? How then was it weeds?' He said to them, 'An enemy has done this.' The servants said to him, 'Then do you want us to go and gather them?' But he said, 'No, lest in gathering the weeds you root up the wheat along with them. Let both grow together until the harvest. And at harvest time I will tell the reapers, gather the weeds first and bind them in bundles to be burnt. Then gather the wheat into my barn.'" So it's one of these parables, and we were speaking about this last week, of planting. And for those of us who aren't keen gardeners, it's sometimes a bit of a challenge to get our head around. But I think it really speaks to us about it's one of those questions I get quite regularly by young people in the confessional, but also in spiritual direction and pastoral counselling, is why does God allow evil to happen? Or also in the lives of young people, why does God allow me to persist in a particular sin? Sometimes we get a little bit discouraged or disheartened when we're trying our hardest to overcome a sin, yet we seem to be weighed down or bogged down by it. And we're there going, well, if God's all-powerful or all-knowing, why would he allow me to struggle like this? Why would he allow me to not overcome this sin at this time in my life? And it can also be, I suppose, directed towards us all during this time of coronavirus. Why does God allow this right now? And I think one of the challenges for us is that we need to step outside of our own experience of things and outside of our own time, and remember that God works in his own time. And that, like we see in the parable where the landowner allows the wheat and the darnel or the weeds to grow up side by side, Jesus sometimes allows these things in our life. He sometimes allows a struggle with a particular sin, or a particular cross or burden that we have to carry, or particular evils even in the world, because it's in his time. And he knows that through the struggle and through the perseverance and through our growing in virtue because of what we have to face, that we're going to be better for it in the long run. And that we shouldn't be afraid and we shouldn't be worried, and we need to trust in him, because at the end of time, he tells us in the parable that the wheat will be burned, evil will be banished, and the virtuous will be victorious. but this is in His time. And sometimes we need to trust, but we also just need to be a little bit more patient, both with God and with ourselves. If we are struggling with something, if there is a hardship or a sorrow in our life that we can't seem to get on top of right now, we need to be a little bit more patient with ourselves and with God, and find what it is that He's speaking to us in these times. And sometimes our desire is to flee from all of our hardships and flee from all of our struggles. But if we allow these things to grow up side by side, we can ourselves be strengthened by them.
That's right.
But we have to trust, and that's not always an easy thing to do, especially in the face of big challenges like we're struggling with as a society at the moment. How do we see through, and how do we trust in God's working throughout history rather than just in this little piece that we can look at? And there's a great example. I think Father Robert Barron uses it in the Catholicism series about sometimes we're looking at a tapestry. And we're only looking at this little piece. But it's only when we step back and we see our little piece in its entirety that we're ever going to be able to appreciate the beauty and all the fine stitching and all of the intricate little pieces. But sometimes we're just standing a little bit too close to things to actually appreciate what God's handiwork and what He's doing over time is. So that was what came up for me in the gospel today. If you heard something better or contrary, if you heard a priest preach to you in your weekend mass and he said the complete opposite to me, I'd love to hear about it in the com box, because I suppose the scriptures speak to us all in different ways at different times.
One thing that struck me is that it's by weight. It's that if He took the weed out sooner, it would damage or somehow uproot the wheat.
Yeah.
So what is that? And when we apply that to our own lives, and there might be a particular sin or there's something troubling us in our life, it's like, what is that? How is that somehow, by God not taking it out and waiting, how is that for the better? Like, there's clearly something that God is asking of you to grow in a particular virtue. Yep. Somewhere that if you remove this too soon, like St. Paul talks about the thorn that's in his side, that allows him it humbles him. Yep. And so we have to sometimes just appreciate that cross, that suffering that God has given to us, to remind us to trust in Him as the good gardener, the good reaper. And
some of us who are just a little bit older and have a little bit less hair know that some of those struggles that you struggle with, especially as a young person, become really helpful when you get a bit older and you're trying to help other people. And it doesn't have to be direct, if you know what I mean. It's not always a direct, oh, well, this is happening in your life, it happened in my life. But it can be just that very fact that there has been a struggle and that we've grown through those experiences and we have learnt from those experiences. So if you're young at heart, you should listen to older people every now and then.
Got some wisdom there.
Yeah, you should listen to me a bit more, Brendan.
Oh, that was a wonderful homilette.
But speaking about wisdom, tonight is a night of wonderful wisdom, because we've just been talking at you for 25 minutes, but we're now going to throw to each week we sort of say that we can't top the week before in guests, and we've sort of been interstate and overseas. We were in Rome, and then we've had really sort of everyday run-of-the-mill people, but we've never had 5 guests at once.
This is going to be something new.
So we're going to put the headphones in because we're going to cross to them now. He's just broken his own headphones. They've been patiently waiting in the waiting room, but we're very glad this evening to be joined by the Dominican sisters of St. Cecilia. Now they're waving. Let me just turn that on. There we go. And they're laughing, which is always a good sign. So on the bottom of your screen, we've got Sister Mary Sarah and Sister Cecilia Rose, who are in the convent here in Melbourne. And then from Sydney at the top of your screen, we've got Sister Cecilia Joseph, Sister Mary Helen, who is originally from Melbourne, and Sister Susanna. Thank you for being with us tonight, sisters. How are you going?
We're great, Father. Thanks for having us.
No, it's really wonderful to see you. For those of you who are watching this evening or listening on the podcast and aren't aware of the Dominican Sisters of St. Cecilia, maybe Sister Mary Sarah, could you just tell us a little bit about the order and where it started?
So we're the Dominican Sisters of St. Cecilia, and we were founded in 1860, right at the eve of the Civil War in a town called Nashville, Tennessee in the USA. In 2008, well, fast forward to 2008. So there's just things happen. And then in 2008, the sisters were asked to come to help with World Youth Day. And we'd like to say that World Youth Day happened and it ended, and everyone went home and we just stayed. We have been here ever since. So we've been in Sydney since 2008. We came to Melbourne in 2018, and we're an order of teaching sisters. So there are about 300 of us altogether. So.
And so you're in Bacchus Marsh here in Melbourne, so you're not actually on lockdown, I believe.
We're free roamers out here in Bacchus Marsh.
But I suppose speaking even further from lockdown, we've got the sisters in Sydney. You're free as birds, really. Can you say that to sisters?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're free. We went to the lake on the weekend. It was beautiful. It's so sunny up here. It's nice.
I think it was just thunderstorming.
Yeah, we had some pretty big.
So.
I made my holy hour this afternoon, and I was praying quietly in the church, and this massive thunderstorm came through. I thought, oh, I've done something to upset the Lord today, but it passed away pretty quickly. Sisters, we've been speaking to lots of people about their experience of lockdown and working and surviving during coronavirus. You're all teachers or working in a school setting. Can you share to us a little bit of your experience of online teaching, especially those of you who are teaching in primary schools?
That's you.
Would be me. I teach sixth grade, and the benefit of this is that we've got an iPad program where the students know how to use an iPad. And so it's been very good, but mind you, they're 11 and 12-year-olds. So we're trying our best to give as many instructions that are clear and systematic. It's been a hurdle. It's been a big one. But I think second time around, we might have a bit more success this time. You know what is that we're a lot more familiar with the parents this time around. Were it to be normal school time, I don't think we've had as much contact with parents and supporting them through this time. So it's a privileged time, I think.
What did you feel when the announcement of the second lockdown came? Because it came a bit out of the blue for people, but I think teachers in particular, you'd been back in the classroom and now you've gone back to online. What was your first sort of reaction?
Oh no.
Yeah. Because you can't replace the face-to-face contact, and it does stretch your creativity, which is good, but you really can't replace just being there in the classroom with the students. And I think they would say the same. They were not looking forward to it either, but we'll make the best of it. But yeah, I think that's true.
The sisters in Sydney, I know that you guys have a lot to do with Notre Dame and the university up there. What about for university students? Because a lot of our listeners and those who follow the podcast are university students who are heading into a second semester of lockdown. Have you got any advice for uni students?
Yeah, well, I think the students that we work with at Notre Dame and at the University of Sydney, the novelty of being able to watch a lecture from your bed, that wore off probably about 2 months ago. So I appreciate it's pretty tough, and it's really calling for a lot of self-discipline, which, is part of something that you might say comes as you lose your hair. So it's just a great opportunity. I think this is going to be a great generation because you guys are being called to a real maturity in your studies, and don't be discouraged. Stick with it, and it'll be interesting to see what God calls this generation to, just in light of everything you're learning right now.
So sisters, you're all teachers. As sisters, does that change the way that you implement your teaching at the schools?
Oh, good question, Brendan. You've stumped them.
I suppose you would be teaching alongside other teachers in the schools as well. So in Melbourne, what's that? I don't know. I'm sort of struggling with my own question.
Brendan's a bit stage struck. He's never spoken to 5 sisters before.
Sisters all-
He's never seen 5 sisters before. I think what Brendan's asking, I suppose, if we walked into your classroom as a classroom with a religious sister as the teacher, how would it be different to, say, the classroom next to you, where the teacher might not be practicing their faith, or they might not be as obviously, you're obviously wearing a habit, that's a big difference, but is there anything else that I suppose that you bring to teaching?
Sydney, take that one.
I guess I could start with it, but I know that there are children that I teach year 7 and 8, ask a lot of questions, and they look to me as someone who knows God, someone who's close to God. And so they're really honest with their questions, and they want to know that they want a reason to believe, because they know they live in a world that really neglects faith. And there's something in children that knows God is real. It's not hard to lead them to God. And so they just want answers, reasonable answers. And I think as sisters, in a particular way, they feel confident to ask us those questions. So
Great. I was lucky just before we before COVID, to be in America and actually visit the mother house of your congregation in Nashville. And we were chatting before. It was just after they'd had a cyclone come through, and now they've had COVID. But one of the beautiful things for me is hearing you sisters speak of Nashville as home. So you've been away from home while this is all happening. Has there been any news from the sisters in America and the Australian sisters who are there at the moment?
Sister Mary Helen, your turn.
Yeah, we've chatted with a few of them actually just yesterday, and it's just great hearing their voices, seeing their faces. It's been a long time since we've seen them, so yeah, it was just good hearing their normal stories, and because you hear things, but the media has such a filter on it. It's very different when you can actually just talk to them, and just fun, just normal. They have some great stories as well. Yeah, really good stories. I don't know. We'll have to tell you later.
Yeah, but like, could you, for people who I suppose haven't met the sisters before, Bacchus Marsh is not exactly the centre of Melbourne, and for those of you in Sydney, so there's 6 of you here in Australia at the moment. Is that correct?
That's correct.
That's
correct.
But in the mother house, it's a little bit bigger than that. Can you maybe share for us a little bit about what the mother house is like and living there?
Sure. So, so the mother house could hold all of us, all 300 of us. But in the normal season, it'd be about 150, maybe 160 sisters who live there. And so from the day that you enter, you spend 5 years now in formation. So we have a sister living there who could be 19 or 20 years old. And then there are sisters who live at the mother house who also work in the apostolate, work in teaching different ministries in Nashville. And then it's also the place where our infirmary is. So at the end of life, that's where, and I hope, Father, you got a chance to meet some of the older sisters. They're absolute gems. They're real, they're absolutely golden. And so so in the house, you can have an age span of 19 or 20 to upper 90s. Sometimes our sisters live to be 100. And something beautiful about this continuity of life that we don't really experience much in the world anymore. It's a very rich experience. Yeah. So.
Yeah, it's a wonderful place to visit. I can only imagine for people who get the chance to live there, but I think it's just such a foreign experience for us here in Australia to see so many religious in one place.
150.
150.
I couldn't even I could not imagine. That sounds like the holiest place on earth.
I can tell you from my few days there that there's a fair bit of laughter and practical jokes and tennis that's played. And they're pretty keen tennis players. I played tennis on a Sunday afternoon with a few of the sisters, and let's just say
Oh dear.
I was very.
I'm sure they're very good.
They were being as nice as they could to me, but the score was humiliating. Sisters, we've got lots of people living in isolation at the moment, in quarantine, in lockdown, all over Melbourne. What about the saints? Have any of you got any saints that inspired you during lockdown, or that you think would inspire the young people of Melbourne?
We do have some saints. We were thinking about this because it wasn't unusual for saints, holy men and holy women, to find themselves in situations that are not too unlike ours, where they would be, for one reason or another, they would be locked up. Sometimes they were imprisoned for religious reasons or for political reasons, and sometimes they were ill, just sort of in a hospital or an infirmary. And so what we were thinking about is, what did the saints do when they were locked up? What did the saints do when they were in this environment that's not natural to us? It's not natural for us to be in a confined space with limited freedom. And so what we wanted to talk a little bit about is just transformation in confinement and what the saints and the fruits of that. So the first one who comes to mind is St. Paul, who not too long after Christianity was founded, St. Paul is imprisoned, and they think that more letters were written in prison than out of prison. And we have this image of St. Paul like chained to a Roman prison wall. It's not a picnic to be in a Roman prison. And he writes things like, "Rejoice in the Lord always. I say it again, rejoice." Like he's exploding with joy as he's in this confinement, and he realizes that it gives him the opportunity to do something to allow God's grace to work through him in maybe a way that would never have happened before. So St. Peter and St. Paul especially, they come to mind first.
Leading on from that, I was thinking of Cardinal Vantuan, who is Vietnamese, and I'm very proud of speaking about this. He's literally, he was called to the presidential house on any other day, and from that point on, he only had a rosary in his pocket because he thought it was just a regular visit, and his life changed. He was imprisoned. He was 13 years in prison. Some of that time was spent in solitary confinement, 2 meter by 2 meter cell with very little light, completely alone, wasn't allowed out to go to the bathroom, very little food. And in this entire time, he would be present. He's present to the Lord, saying Mass, using 3 drops of wine and a drop of water and whatever crumb of bread he could have. He's present to the Lord's love. And he wrote many things on hope. So I think hope is something we need to look forward to and hold on to.
Sister, we're kindred spirits, because one of the few books that are here on the very ornamental bookshelf here is Cardinal Vantuan's 5 Loaves and 2 Fishes. So this is a bingo moment.
We'll have to swap books further.
I think if young people were looking for something worthwhile to read during lockdown, Cardinal Vantuan's, and it's not a big book, but it's just jam-packed with spiritual gems. And his description of celebrating Mass and his obvious love for the Eucharist, I think, is something that we can all learn from during this time, during lockdown. What about the sisters in Sydney? Any saints that inspire you?
Yeah, well, I've been nominated to share my saint, but here's his picture. I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah.
It's Matteo Farina. And so he was proclaimed venerable just, I think, last month or 2 months ago by Pope Francis. But born in 1990, died in 2009. And just kind of your typical normal young person, so to speak. But at the age of, I think, around 13, he was diagnosed with some type of brain cancer. And so before that, he was just a young man of faith, went to a Capuchin parish. The friars really led him to love the Lord and love the church. And then when he was diagnosed with this cancer, he really let his suffering transform him and draw him closer to Christ, make him more like Christ. But also he discovered he could bring others along with him in his suffering. And so I was thinking of all of us, all of you all in isolation or quarantine or lockdown. And in this time of, so to speak, suffering, Matteo, but also we could learn, he had a heart for evangelization and wanted others to know Christ. And even in his suffering, would look for ways to bring Christ to them. And I have a great quote that kind of goes with our times right now. And so he said, "I hope to succeed in my mission to infiltrate among young people, speaking to them about God. I observe those around me to enter among them as silent as a virus and infect them with it." Disease of so I thought, good job, Mateo.
So, as silent as a virus, did you say?
With love.
Fantastic. Anyone else from the Sydney house who we are aware that you're out of lockdown, but anyone that would inspire us here in Melbourne?
I have another lockdown saint, is Thomas More. I've been reading his book, Sadness of Christ. I was reading it during Lent, but I ended up reading it all through Easter. It was great. But it's just fantastic. You know, everyone sort of knows how, with what good humor and peace he able to approach his martyrdom. But that the time before was so key. So he wrote this while he was in prison, and it was so moving to see him. He has this whole section at the back where what he did while he was in prison was sit and write out like really key lines from the Psalms or scripture or whatever, that like key truths that he kept in his heart to keep focus, and how he was really careful in the time to make sure he stayed awake in prayer. Was really, when he prayed, he really was praying, and he drew a lot of strength from like in facing his own weakness. Maybe he was a bit surprised that he wasn't feeling like this daring courage to run toward martyrdom. He wasn't feeling that, but his advice really is that when we find ourselves in a difficult situation and we're in our own little agony, remember Christ. God's already done it. He's gone through those tough things, and we can lean into Christ. So I think it's very inspiring.
There we go. Who haven't we heard from yet?
All right, lucky last. I've got just one of the four Teresas. They're all good, and all of them had some sort of lockdown, quarantine. But I've been thinking of Saint Teresa Benedicta of the Cross, maybe better known as Edith Stein. And she was a Jewish woman, actually a philosopher, who converted to Catholicism and then eventually entered the Carmelite convent, which is really a vocation of solitude, really, to be alone with God. And so she had 9 years in the convent. But then the reason why obviously she's well known is that she was eventually arrested under the Nazi regime for her Jewish heritage, and she died in Auschwitz. And there's just this amazing quote that she has where she talks about her confidence in God, even facing all of that, and then also her great sense of the solidarity. So she could have, there were opportunities which she had where she could have escaped, she could have avoided arrest, but she had this beautiful sense of when we suffer, we never suffer alone. And I think for us in isolation, there can be sort of a sense of like, what's the point, you know? So it just all seems so pointless. But just that reminder of the communion of saints, and that when we suffer, we can offer it up for whoever might need it. So just some words of wisdom from Edith Stein. She says, one thing alone is certain, that God is, and that his hand holds us in being, that even if around us the whole world falls to rack and ruin, we are not ruined if we hold ourselves to him.
Beautiful. Thank you, sisters. You give very good suggestions, and I'm sure that you'd give some very good advice as well to some young people around Melbourne and all of our listeners. What would be one piece of advice that you'd give to a young person for discerning their vocation? Perhaps we'll start with Sister Cecilia in Melbourne.
Thanks, Brendan.
I think for me, the most important thing is to pray. Spend the time to listen to the voice of the beloved so that you would recognize when he's calling, if he's calling you to a vocation. So keep praying.
Sister Mary Helen, you were from Melbourne originally, so I suppose the question, but for a young Melburnian woman who has discerned a congregation that took you to Nashville and then brought you back to Sydney, any advice for a young woman from Melbourne who might be discerning her vocation this evening?
Yeah, God still likes Melbourne. He's still calling people from there. Yeah, no, he's listening. He's calling. So just listen. No, but seriously, advice. My favorite piece of advice is sometimes discerning God's will for tomorrow. The best way really is what's God's will today. So just to be at peace, live today in love. Live today with all the love you can, and you will be in the best place to live and love more tomorrow in whatever way God shows you.
Sister Cecilia Joseph, any advice for a young woman who obviously, and those normal things of Eucharistic adoration and the Mass are not open to young women in Melbourne at the moment, but anything so that this time of lockdown isn't a complete sort of waste?
Yeah. I was thinking about that earlier. Just I would encourage young women to have a schedule that they follow. Sisters said prayer, but commit yourself to certain things during the day, because part of your religious life is a commitment to Christ. And so if you can do certain things, maybe you say have a morning offering and read the scriptures in the morning, and do something at noon, something in the evening, just so that you're really holding yourself accountable. That would be a good use of time.
That's really great cross-promotion, sister, to Melbourne Praise, the channel that they're watching at the moment, because we pray daily the Rosary at 12 and the Chaplet at 3 as a way of giving young people a chance to break up their day, especially if they're studying from home.
And sisters, I'm just reading the comments at the moment, and our comment section absolutely loves you. They've said things like, what a joy it is to see sisters use nuns are the coolest and holiest. And then they've asked a question. They said, as nuns, are you allowed to watch TV, Netflix and YouTube? Do you have phones and laptops for leisure? Are you allowed to listen to mainstream music?
Yeah. So as sisters, we are allowed to watch TV. We're allowed to watch movies. And we have like the use of phones and things like that. Obviously we use technology. We're on technology right now. It's all though as a means to an end, right? So we have to live in this world with our eyes fixed on the next. So we do use those things because we're in the world and we're at the service of the world. But yeah, always with the eye of how does this serve Christ? How does this lead to Christ? So,
sisters, one of the things that we've been talking about, I suppose, is isolation. But I also know that a lot of young people are struggling with community life at the moment. One of the challenges of quarantine is that we're generally finding ourselves spending a lot more time with our families or our housemates, locked in a convent, I suppose, for want of a better terms. Any advice? You, as sisters, live a common life, and it's very much part of your calling. Any advice to those of us who don't necessarily live that closely with people all the time, but of how we can do that well?
It's a great question, and we noticed that with our students that they really struggled being stuck at home with their siblings. But then also a lot of graces came from that, and that even one boy said to me one day, he's like, "This is like last night we ate dinner at the dinner table for the first time in my life." So lots of opportunities, and probably just to have an open heart. One line that I really like is that you are part of God's plan for the people that you live with. So for us, like we change assignments, we move around, but just to trust, hey, right here, right now, today, I'm part of God's plan for the 4 sisters who I live with. And so the same is true with our family. So whoever you're locked in with, to really even to ask God, like, okay, God, like, show me how I can love these people just a little bit more today, and also how to receive love from them, because I know lots of us are missing being with maybe the people that we choose to be with, or the people who we feel really good when we're with. So, okay, God, like, these are the people I'm stuck with. Help me to receive your love through them, and with confidence, because He's going to do it.
And say you were stuck with a sister who just really grated on you a little bit. One of you was reading the Four Theresas. Was one of them Therese of Lisieux? Who obviously in Story of a Soul, and Brendan, I think Story of a Soul was in your top 5, wasn't it?
Top 5, definitely is.
Yeah,
she classic story
of sanctifying the sister who was really grating on her. But I'm sure that wouldn't happen in the Dominican Sisters of St. Cecilia.
That's it. We'll see when your diaries are released.
We're almost out of time this evening, but we have asked all of our guests over the last few weeks whether there was something that they learnt about themselves during COVID-19, or in particular lockdown, that they've tried to sort of implement in their daily lives sort of going forward. I suppose for the sisters in Sydney in particular, now that you're back to a much more normal rhythm, but even for the sisters here in Melbourne as we go back into lockdown, is there something that you learnt first time around that you're trying to do now?
For me, I'm prioritizing prayer time, especially when it gets busy. So when it gets busy, I need more time to pray, because I find myself scattered and distracted, and my heart is just everywhere. So if I can just make myself stop and sit down and slow down and pray and ask the Lord, what do you want me to do today, rather than I've got a whole list of things to do. So that's been my way, just to spend more time in prayer and slow down.
Yeah. And maybe just coming from Melbourne, in the rush of the day when you're teaching at school, you rush by people all day long, you rush by students. And I think something I learned in COVID was slow down and just take the time, take the time to ask how people are really doing, and don't always be in a rush to be like on to the next thing. Just take, and I think that's been a real life changer for me, just to slow down a bit and really treasure the people that are in your life.
And what about up there in Sydney, now that you can get out to the nightclubs and pubs again, even though we can't here in Melbourne? Is there anything that you're changing in your lives going forward?
Well, I think all of us, we talked about, would agree, Father, we're not going to the pubs, but we're going to Mass every day. Throughout the whole situation, we actually have we've had the gift of having Mass every single day. And I know one day early on, I caught myself just yawning or zoning out, and I stopped and I said, you are one of the few people in the world who has the opportunity of being at Mass right now. Take advantage of that. And so I think this time for all of us has really renewed our love and devotion for the Mass.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, I just want to thank you all for being with us this evening. You're a wonderful witness to the church and to the world of the vocation to religious life and of the joy that comes from being consecrated to the Lord. So thank you so much for your wonderful witness and your powerful work for the church, both here and in Melbourne. And thank you for joining us this evening. We might just say a quick prayer together for each other and for the young people who are listening tonight. So I'm happy to lead because we didn't tell the sisters, unless either of the sisters would like to lead a prayer. No, I'm happy to lead. So let's just say a quick prayer. Heavenly Father, we ask you to bless the sisters, bless their work and their ministry, bless the people they encounter on a daily basis, and bless their community, that they may be gifted with many vocations, that they may be strengthened in number so as to continue your saving mission in the world and be a witness of your love through their generous service and their lives of selfless giving. And we pray for the young people who are listening this evening, who have joined us, that they, inspired by these sisters, may be strengthened in their own desire and resolve to follow you in whatever you may be calling them to. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. Saint Teresa Benedicta of the Cross,
Pray for us.
Venerable Cardinal Vantuan,
Pray for us.
Saint Thomas More,
Pray for us.
Saint Cecilia,
Pray for us.
Saint Thomas.
Pray for us.
Who did I miss? I think I got the Sydney sisters, but who did the Melbourne sisters? Who were the early?
Blessed Matteo.
Oh, St. Paul.
Saint Paul, pray for us,
Pray for us.
and Blessed Matteo, or Venerable Matteo,
Pray for us.
pray for us.
Pray for us.
Okay, thank you so much for joining us tonight, sisters. We're going to put you back in the waiting room where you can watch the end of the show. But thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Brendan. Another great show. I don't know how we're going to be able to top. Let's take those earpieces out, otherwise the sisters laugh. We can still hear the sisters laughing in the
So much
earpiece.
joy.
So it's wonderful, and yeah,
I hope so many young women watch that.
So do I.
Because like the amount of joy,
Yeah.
if the Lord calls you, please go.
Yeah, don't be
That just
afraid,
looks like
because-
so much like.
And I had the pleasure of spending 4 or 5 days at the mother house, and it was after a tornado, so they had no electricity. But to see the joy in these sisters in a house that had no electricity, and it had no electricity for a number of days. But then, even though that they had all their own struggles, on the Saturday afternoon, they packed up their minivans with food and hampers, and they went to the local neighbourhood to serve those people less fortunate. So a really wonderful witness. So we thank the sisters for being with us tonight. If you're listening live this evening, make sure you head across to Facebook and like our page at Melbourne Praise. You'll also see there a new event that's coming up in the next couple of weeks, starting on, and I've just lost my notes here, Tuesday the 28th of July. We're going to be starting in the 8-week Jeff Caven series, the Unlocking the Bible Timeline. And we spoke about this a few weeks ago, when we started the podcast, but we finally got around to doing it. It'll be 8 weeks via Zoom from the comfort of your own home. So really entering into the scriptures more deeply during this time of lockdown. So that starts on Tuesday fortnight from this coming Tuesday week from this Tuesday. You will need to register online for that, and all the details are there to register online at Melbourne Praise on Facebook. Otherwise,
like it. We've hit 200 likes.
And 500 plus followers on YouTube. So if you are listening on, watching or listening on YouTube, make sure you subscribe to the channel as well. Our daily and weekly prayers, but also in addition to that, our Thursday night praise at 6:30 p.m. A chance to pray together as the young people of Melbourne, whilst we continue in this time of quarantine. Otherwise, you can find both the podcast both on Google Podcasts and Apple Podcasts.
Oh,
Just
and Spotify, hey.
and Spotify now.
Yeah,
Wow,
that
Brendan,
makes
you
us feel almost a little bit
we're
better.
almost legitimate.
Yeah, Spotify. Hey.
Spotify, there you go. So thank you very much. We're going to finish tonight rather than the play out, which we would normally play out. We're going to finish with a preview of a new series of podcasts called Locked Out, which is by a young Catholic man here in Melbourne called Christian Bergman. He's a young, newly become father of a beautiful daughter, but he's a graduate of Campion College. They're up there in Sydney,
Yes.
and he started this podcast. So we're gonna play out tonight's episode with his podcast as a bit of a plug for him, and you'll find that on the Melbourne Praise channel on YouTube and also on the podcast channels as well. But thanks very much for being with us. We'll be back next Sunday night, and we'll keep you all in our prayers in the week ahead. God bless everyone.
God bless.
I was having a conversation recently with someone who, in the wake of Australia's severe economic lockdown, had been laid off from work. And it was a really difficult conversation to have because naturally this person was struggling emotionally and mentally and financially. But what really surprised me and what really moved me was this person's whole approach to the situation. They said, and I quote, "I'm just trying to take everything as a gift." Now my friend who was with me at the time thought this was a very strange thing to say, and it probably is. But I also couldn't help but wonder if this comment actually had its finger on the pulse of grace. And it also put me in mind actually of one of my favourite writers, Flannery O'Connor. One of the reasons I love her stories is because they're so unexpected and they're so rich with meaning. She herself said that her fiction was an invitation to deeper and stranger visions. Her stories were also preoccupied with the workings of grace in the most unexpected places, which is one of the reasons why she was so preoccupied with the freakish and the grotesque and the violent. She knew that sometimes it was only moments of great disruption, even violence, that awoke our sense of the transcendent. Flannery O'Connor was only 15 years old when her father died, and of that she wrote this: "The reality of death has come upon us, and a consciousness of the power of God has broken our complacency like a bullet in the side. Our plans were so beautifully laid out, so ready to be carried out. But with magnificent certainty, God laid them aside and said, 'You have forgotten mine.'" Even at such a young age, Flannery O'Connor was aware of how even tragedy could function as the intrusion of grace into our lives. Elsewhere, she said, "We always want our grace to be warm and binding, not dark and disruptive." In a way, she was similar to J.R.R. Tolkien, who famously said that divine punishments are also divine gifts. Through the supreme inventiveness of the Creator, what looks like a punishment may actually be a means of attaining a blessing that could not otherwise be attained. But the question stands, why did Flannery O'Connor and J.R.R. Tolkien think such things? Think such strange things? At a guess, I would say, it's because they were both devoutly Catholic. You see, central to the mystery of redemption, they both knew, was the dramatic event of Christ's life and death and resurrection. It was a life that led up to and a resurrection from crucifixion. And I don't know if you've ever found this strange. I have. But whenever we gather for worship as Catholics, we do so before an image, before a depiction of a man being tortured to death. And I want you to think about that. And I want you to think about that until you actually start to get uncomfortable. Because from the earliest days of the church, we have upheld the crucified Christ, which for the ancient world was the ultimate sign of God's curse, the ultimate sign of God's punishment, and the ultimate sign of tyrannical political power. But for us, in the light of the resurrection, it was the ultimate means of grace. As Tolkien might say, by the Creator's supreme inventiveness, this ultimate punishment became the ultimate means of blessing. And that blessing? The restoration of all creation in Christ. So, if we want deeper and stranger visions of the way grace works, let me put this question to you, because it's been on my mind a lot lately. During this pandemic, in this situation we find ourselves in, how would Flannery O'Connor read this situation? How would Tolkien read this situation? My guess is that they would use the crucified Christ as the key to understanding even the most disruptive moments of their lives. As Pope John Paul II was fond of saying, the cross stands still while the world turns. And this, I put to you, is the faith of the freakish. Because grace is unexpected, grace is disruptive, and grace is even freakish. Because Jesus is all of those things. Jesus is unexpected. He is disruptive, and maybe we sometimes only encounter him in the freakish. But grace is also everything, because Jesus is also everything. Joseph Ratzinger, who later became Pope Benedict XVI, said this: Christ allocates ruin to no one. He himself is pure salvation, and whoever stands beside him stands in the sphere of salvation and grace. But what that grace looks like, maybe for that we do need deeper and stranger visions.